Welcome to Insights with Us. I'm Anastasia, a licensed professional counselor, owner of Happy Mind Wellness Company, and creator of this podcast. I am so excited to talk with you about what it means to be a part of the human experience and to go on this journey with you in learning to sit with discomfort and discovering what lies beneath it. Thank you for joining us, and I can't wait to get this first episode started. We currently don't have sponsors, so until we do, this podcast is brought to you by Happy Mind Wellness Company, a place to find your happy. If you live in Colorado and are looking for mental health support, visit happymindwellness.com for more information. Today is our first episode of Insights with Us. And so because this is our first episode, I've decided that I'm going to dive deeper into my past and what led me to this moment in my life where I'm telling you about who I am, where I'm from, and how I chose this path. As you listen, I want you to think about whether or not anything in my journey resonates with you. Have you had a similar experience, or was it completely different? What does my story mean to you? Allow my words and what I decided to share today be a starting point for this journey that we are going to take together in creating insight, and know that we will dive deeper into several ideas that I will mention today in later episodes. When trying to decide where to start, I decided to share a little bit about the environment I grew up in, because it is far from traditional. I grew up as a third culture kid, which means I was raised in a culture other than that of my parents. It means that I have a mixed identity where I was influenced not just by my parents' culture, but that of the cultures of the different countries that I lived in. Any third culture kid or TCK knows how difficult it can be to explain where you're from because it isn't as simple as, well, I was born and raised in this location. I'm not necessarily from where I was born, and I'm not necessarily from where I lived the longest. And it's never as easy as this is where I was born and raised. And as many third culture kids know, we typically have a short answer and a long answer, depending on who we're with and who asked us this question. So as far as my short answer goes, nowadays I'll say that, because I spent most of my summers in the state of Colorado and I've lived here since adulthood, I'm from Colorado. It's easy. Most people don't question it. If someone wants to know more, or if they ask where I was raised, my second short answer is, I actually grew up all over the world, mostly in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. But I've lived and spent most of my time in Colorado. The long story is much more complicated and is often better explained with the use of maps and graphics. That way I can display age and location simultaneously, and it's easier for people to keep in their heads. So I'm not going to go into all those specifics today, maybe someday, but not today. And to kind of give you a hint at that long story, I figured I'd share some statistics with you. I have moved 7 times by the time I was 7. We would typically move every 2 to 3 years. And even if we stayed in the same country for an extended amount of time, we would change houses. I had moved to Indonesia at the age of 3 weeks and lived in America for a total of 4 years from the ages of 3 to 7. I lived in Jakarta, Indonesia for a total of 5 years, and Abu Dhabi, UAE for a total of 9. There was a lot of hopping around in there. When I turned 18, I moved to Colorado officially for the first time and have never really left. I loved living overseas, and I loved the experience, the knowledge, and the perspective that it gave me. I also have anxiety, which we'll talk about in a second, and have learned that I prefer to have a home base so that when I go out and travel the world, I always know where I can return to. I learned this because moving around so much and having my friends move just as often was incredibly challenging. I had to make new friends every 2 to 3 years. I was constantly packing up and moving, and I never knew what to expect from the future because it was always different and I was always having to adapt. And that can be completely terrifying, especially if you already have anxiety on top of that. Now, I'm not just telling you this story because it's interesting, though hopefully it is. I am sharing this background to help you understand how this experience helped me in my mental health journey and led me to starting this podcast. This lifestyle has challenged me to stay flexible, to learn how to connect with new people, to be respectful to those whose ideas and beliefs differ greatly from my own, and to be open to any and all experiences, even if it might seem uncomfortable or even scary. I have been caught up in tsunamis, riots where governments were overthrown or shut down, earthquakes and volcano eruptions. I have swam in bioluminescence, floated in the Dead Sea, and participated in a sweat lodge ceremony with the elders of a tribe. These are all experiences that were not necessarily planned to happen, and some of them not a great situation. But because of my ability to stay flexible and to go, hey, why not? It could be a fun experience. I was able to adapt to what life threw at me and come out the other side with an incredible memory and a story to tell. Not only that, but being surrounded by so many different groups of people, constantly hearing every possible perspective of every topic, including war, history, religion, sexuality, mental health, and even just how different groups of people interact, have helped me come at the world from a place of non-judgment. I try my best to enter each space from a place of curiosity, and when I struggle with that, I learn how to recognize it and navigate that discomfort too. I want to share these tools and this perspective with you all, and hopefully help you gain some insight into your life as well. I credit being a TCK for my love of knowledge, exploration, and curiosity, and it's a big part of what made me choose to go into psychology and learn about the human mind. Being a TCK has also created anxiety within me, which is another factor in my mental health journey. However, being a TCK is not the only part of my identity that has challenged me and set me on this course. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about what my mental health is, how my anxiety has shown up in my life, what those challenges are, and how I learned to navigate them. Anxiety is genetic, which means I have my relatives to thank for my anxiety. Not all of it. Some of it was caused by my lifestyle or by different challenges I've had to face growing up. But an article from the National Institute for Health titled Genetics of Generalized Anxiety Disorder and Related Traits shows that generalized anxiety disorder, which is what I have, has a 30% risk of heritability, which means there is a 30% chance of you passing down your generalized anxiety to your child. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Grandpa. Now, anxiety runs in my family, and I learned this very early on, and I started developing symptoms at a very young age. I remember my first panic attack occurred when I was in 7th grade, and I was worried that I wouldn't finish all my homework in time for the following day. It was late at night, well past my bedtime, and I was freaking out. My mom had to force me to stop working and send me to bed. This need that I have had throughout my life to be perfect, to get everything done all at once, only worsened over time, and it reached its most intense when I was in high school. At that point, oh man, I was trying to do every hobby, every sport, do all of the classes, all the electives, have all the friends. I was trying to stay on top of everything. And because of that, I was experiencing intense nausea and vomiting, panic attacks consistently, migraines. And each time one of these happened at school, I'd end up in the nurse's office. They'd send me home, and my mom would take me on a mental health day. These mental health days, we would relax, have fun, spend time recharging, and she would make sure that I did not work during my mental health day. And I always found myself feeling better. And in that, I realized that I needed to have pockets of time where I was able to slow down and relax and recharge. Then, when I lived in Jakarta, I had a counselor, and I remember that I would come into his office in a panic about not having enough credits, not being able to graduate, trying to figure out my schedule, worried that I shouldn't take a free hour because I needed more classes. And he would always laugh and shake his head and sit down with my schedule and say something along the lines of, "I'm looking at it, and I assure you, you are fine. In fact, let's give you 2 free periods this semester. I think you can handle it." This voice that I still have in my head to this day was incredibly helpful. And my senior year, when I was back in Abu Dhabi, my counselor was trying to convince me that I had to take IB classes, which is the European version of AP for those Americans listening. And if I didn't take IB, I wasn't going to graduate. Now, IB is a 2-year program, and I only had 1 year of schooling left. And he was trying to convince me that I should do 2 years of work in 1 year. I reached back out to my counselor from Jakarta, and his soothing words helped me stand up to this new counselor. No, I was going to be fine. I can graduate just fine without taking all these IB courses, and I will get into college. Not only am I okay, but I'm actually thriving as I am. And like I said, I still hear his voice in my head to this day. Anytime I catch myself falling into those old patterns, pushing to accomplish more than I need to in a small amount of time, I just hear that, slow down. You're okay. You're going to succeed even if you move at a slightly slower pace. You are smart. You are determined. You won't let yourself fail. Trust yourself. Now, when I hit college, the pendulum swung the other way. I had incredibly strict boundaries with everyone around me and my time. I always went to bed at 10 o'clock. I stopped doing all of my homework by 9. I only hung out with people maybe 2-3 times a week. Even when I was in the dorms, I'd lock myself in my dorm room and not spend time with people if I had already hit that social limit. I was going to make sure that I did not overwhelm myself or my anxiety. But in those strict and rigid boundaries, I still had poor boundaries with myself. I was disconnected from my body, and I often pushed myself too hard. So even though on the outside I was thriving, I was getting everything done, I was going to bed at a reasonable hour, I was saying no to anybody if I was going out too many days in a row, on the inside, I was a wild mess. My mind never slowed down. But over time, with the help of a lot of really great people and a lot of really great knowledge I gained through the course of my undergraduate studies, I learned how to connect with my body. I took a meditation course, and I realized how much my anxious thoughts were running my life. And I figured out not just how to slow down my schedule, but slow down my mind. I did not just set boundaries externally, but I learned to set them within myself too. I started making time consistently throughout the week for yoga and meditating and my hobbies, instead of just having a chunk of time in a mental health day, once or twice a month. I would practice self-care consistently throughout my day and remind myself that it would all be okay. And by the time I graduated college, I was finally starting to find a rhythm that worked for me. And I was starting to recognize the true meaning of balance. Because balance isn't learning how everything fits into your schedule, but being able to prioritize as needed and stay flexible and shift those priorities as something changes. Now, my master's program was the hardest that I had worked for school in my life. Yet it was the best that I had felt mentally and emotionally because I recognized each week was going to look different. And I didn't need to figure out how to make every week the same and force myself to stick with that schedule for the sake of balance. I needed to take what I had learned from my TCK life and be flexible and adapt depending on what was thrown at me each week. I had spent several years now discovering and learning my boundaries, and I stuck with them. I continued to practice self-care and had learned how to say no when it was necessary. I still fell back into old patterns, and I still am today, but I'm better at recognizing them now. And I improve every single day, month, year that I am choosing to intentionally check in with myself and notice. Because it is that intentionality that is allowing me to learn and grow within myself. I hope that in this podcast, we can dive deeper into recognizing the different ways discomfort can show up in your body, discovering different types of self-care and rest, and how to pay attention to what your body and mind are telling you. Because these are the key pieces that help me on my journey. And even if it might be uncomfortable, even if I end up sharing things that maybe I didn't think I would share about my life with a bunch of people that I don't know, I truly believe that we are all on this human experience journey together. And if I can share a little bit about what has helped me and have guests share what has helped them, I truly believe that this experience and knowledge can help you find insight into your own journey. So now that you understand how I got to where I am mentally, I want to spend the final part of this episode sharing how I became a mental health therapist, what type of therapy I do, and maybe give you a little bit of perspective in how I view the world. Because life can be really hard sometimes, but it can also be really incredible. And we are all just trying to figure out how to sit with, accept, and work through the hard stuff while we enjoy and be present and love all the good stuff. There is often an assumption in our society that you need to know what you want to do from the start. And this isn't always the case. Yes, it's true. Some people find what they want and it never wavers. But then there are some people that float from major to major or job to job with nothing quite feeling right for the majority or all of their lives. For me, it was a mix of the two. In high school, I took a psychology class and learned about trauma and PTSD. I thought it was fascinating how different experiences could affect our brains, and I wanted to learn more. This set me on the path of psychology, but I had no idea what I wanted to do with it. In college, I realized that I enjoyed research and I loved teaching, so I thought I would just get my PhD and become a professor. But when it came to applying, I got into a master's program that was close to home. Now, family is really important to me, and choosing a graduate program where I could stay near my support system felt right. So I chose that path, still with the intention of getting my PhD afterwards and continuing on to be a professor. When I finished my master's, I once again applied to PhD programs and had a few interviews, but my dog got sick with cancer right around the same time, and I just wasn't ready to leave. So I ended up working at the same company that I did my internship at, which gave me the stability that I needed to take care of my sick pup and enough money that I was able to feel stable in my own life while I did so. I worked at this organization for several years, doing crisis work, intake, and triage. And while I loved the people I worked with and I enjoyed helping my clients, I was overworked, underpaid, and burned out within the first year. I stuck around just long enough to convince myself that I could not be a therapist, and I started looking at other jobs, certifications, degrees. In fact, I was so burned out that the idea of stocking shelves at a retail store seemed better than a salaried job as a therapist. If I'm being honest, private practice was my last attempt at being a psychotherapist. If I did not like it, then I was going to continue in my plan of becoming a professor and just accept that this was not the job I was meant to have. However, being in private practice has allowed me to set actual boundaries in my life, which we know from the last part of this episode, are really important to me. And I was able to have a true work-life balance where I was earning enough money to live, but I was actually able to enjoy my time. I found that working with clients who want to be present in therapy and actually want to put the work in to learn about themselves changed the game for me. And because of that, I am still doing this work today. And I really enjoy being a therapist now. It just took finding that right environment. I've been running my practice for a few years now, and I'm learning a lot on this journey, including my love for sitting in discomfort and helping others discover how to lean into their discomfort too. I have had a number of sessions recently that have been incredibly challenging and uncomfortable, and the topics that we processed, including religion, sexuality, and difference in values from those we love, helped me recognize that I really do have a passion for this work. And I have passion for having uncomfortable conversations and diving deeper. It was this recognition of this passion that motivated me to look for ways to share my knowledge with more people and try to have these uncomfortable conversations to try to reach more ears. In this search, I started looking into becoming a consultant for EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. We'll talk more about EMDR in the future, I'm sure, and I'm not quite a consultant yet, but it is a goal that I have. And I decided to try and start a podcast in the hopes of finding ways to incorporate my love of teaching and my passion for knowledge in one place. There's a quote by Oscar Wilde that is, "Be yourself, everyone else is taken." But sometimes we spend so much time trying to fit into the boxes we think other people want us to be in that we forget who we are. And I have worked hard to become this authentic, honest, and true version of myself. And I want to love and accept each and every person I meet as their authentic and true selves. What this means is I accept that others do not think the way that I think. In fact, I expect it. Even friends and family who have had similar life experiences as me do not see the world the same. And I appreciate their perspectives just as much as my own, because with those differences, we can continue to learn. And what this means for my work and for this podcast is that I want to help my clients and my listeners understand what matters to them and what they are working towards, what you are working towards, and also what you struggle with and what is difficult in your lives. The main type of therapy that I practice is called acceptance and commitment therapy, which was created by Dr. Stephen Hayes. One of the ideas in ACT is that there is so much to the human experience: happiness, sadness, joy, grief, calm, anger. And it is our gut reaction to push away the uncomfortable parts and pretend they don't exist, while only focusing on the parts we want to feel. But in reality, we need every part, not just the happiness and joy, but the anger and the sadness too. And I want to help others find a way to let all of your experiences exist and be right there existing in that discomfort with you while we shift our focus towards who we want to be. I also think it's important for you all to know that I went through a yoga teacher training. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm a certified EMDR therapist, at least done with my basic training. I'm partway through my advanced. I'll let you know as I learn more. I do a lot of mind-body connection work, mindfulness, and understanding how our brains get stuck in certain thought patterns because it's helped us survive for the majority of our lives. But it doesn't have to be how you always think and how you always are. We are constantly changing and adapting. And the more you think about it, the more that you slow down and be intentional in noticing your reactions and your behaviors, the more you can work towards becoming that person that is so true to who you are. That is the person I hope to help you find. Each of these ideas we will talk about in more detail in the future. But for now, just remember that your mind and body are connected, and everything you experience is just a piece of information that you can look at, sit with, and decide what to do with. You just need to be willing to slow down and ask the right questions. For example, if you get upset or angry while listening to any of the ideas I discuss, or just throughout your day-to-day life, pause and ask yourself, where is this coming from? If you notice you are avoiding or want to pause and metaphorically or literally run away from my words, ask yourself, what am I trying to avoid? Is it the words that I'm saying? Or are you trying to run away from the memories those words are bringing up? And if you are willing, maybe stick around a little bit longer in that discomfort, because you might gain some of that insight we've been talking about, and we'll talk more about in detail in the coming episodes. And maybe you can even learn how to hear ideas that differ from yours without that pressure to change your mind. Because I truly believe that we can understand each other and still not agree. And that deeper understanding could just change how we see the world. Thank you so much for listening today. In this episode, we talked about my third culture kid lifestyle, my mental health journey and how I navigated it, and how I became a therapist and decided to start this podcast. I truly appreciate those who chose to join me today, and I look forward to building insight with each and every one of you in the future. Hopefully, something we talked about today resonated with you. If it did, let yourself sit with that idea for a little while longer. Notice your reaction to it. And if you have any questions for this podcast or any themes you'd like us to focus on in the future, send us a message on Instagram at insightswithuspodcast, or send us an email at insightswithus@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please follow, like, or subscribe. I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you're listening. Thank you for creating insight with us.